Thanks, guys, for that first carrier update this morning. Right now, we're going to welcome our editorial writer, Grace Sharkey, to the show to talk about today's top story. Grace, thanks for joining us. And of course, we're going to get into a little bit about our episode of Great Quarter Gals yesterday, but we'll do that second today.
Yeah, well, a little teaser for that. It was a good episode.
little teaser, but we're going to start off talking about Transportation Insight and a really exciting platform that they're just getting ready to launch. Let's talk about what it is and why it's important to furthering their mission in the freight tech space.
Yeah, so a little bit of history since Ken Beyer took over as CEO of both Transportation Insight and NTG operations. Basically, he became CEO of Transportation Insight Holdings Group, which holds both of those companies. A big part of his strategy has been to acquire a lot of the technologies that both companies need in order to continue to add services to their shippers and their carriers. Over the last year, we've seen them make huge investments in Swanlee, Transaver Global, Platinum Circle Group, and spend management experts. So a couple of parcel e-commerce providers and just different offerings that you haven't always seen from those two, especially on the NTG side. So over the last year, they've started to integrate all of those services into one platform, which is now Beon. And they've been using Beon in-house with their own operations and employees since October of 2020. But now what they're going to be doing is releasing those services out to their shippers and carriers. So shippers and carriers are going to be able to either integrate into Beon, get into Beon through web or mobile apps, and provide just a different experience than they're used to seeing. And I think this is great. It's showing you again what effect that a lot of these freight tech-enabled marketplaces or just tech-enabled freight brokerages, logistics providers have put pressure on this industry, and for brokers to really focus on what values are they adding for their shippers. And that's not just being able to save a buck and pass that buck over, but to help them scale their own abilities, right? So you want a logistics provider that's not only going to be able to do truckload, which those both have been able to do for quite some time, but if you want to start selling smaller packages, or you want to start maybe going into a different product line, they're going to have the parcel and e-commerce technology behind you in order to scale those services.
Grace, it definitely sounds like they made the best use of their time throughout this freight tech boom throughout the pandemic and the last few quarters here. With this really intelligent acquisitions and build out, do you see anyone else really being able to replicate or follow in their footsteps with this? Because it definitely seems like a one-of-a-kind solution, and it's not just like one of those freight tech solutions where it's just like, oh, this is new and shiny, but is it really useful?
Yeah, I think that they have some really great experts behind them helping them through this process. I think that whenever you're looking to add technology into a more traditional brokerage model, it's always difficult. And that's not just technology like you're seeing in these added services, but just operational technology to make their jobs easier and more efficient. It takes good leadership, insight, and training in order to pull that off. I think that you see this change in leadership and you see this new direction in the acquired companies that they had. And I would say that Ken has probably really great leadership qualities in order to make sure that that is pulled off and that happens. Shelley Simpson in her past, we'll bring that up again, Kaylee, has been known to lead JB through this same type of transition. It is tough, but I think as you start seeing employees who have just as powerful tools in front of them at home come into these companies, it's going to be a little bit easier to transition into a tech-enabled freight brokerage than in the past when, if you didn't have cell phones and things that people are using on a daily basis. This is now becoming table stakes, not just for the shippers and carriers working with these companies, but honestly, I think for the employees that want to work for them as well.
Grace, I'm glad that you bring that point up about employees wanting to make the jump into a freight tech-enabled company, because sometimes it can be kind of intimidating to make that jump, right? You don't necessarily think, I've never worked with this TMS, or I've never used this software before, and now I'm scared to do it. I don't know if I'm qualified. And especially when you come into a company that has so many different pieces of software that are fragmented, and you feel like you might have to spend a ton of time getting to know each piece. So it's important to have a company take the steps to make it all one, right? Because then it's a little bit less intimidating to attract that talent, even if it might not be completely top tier, but then they know that they can develop their talent as they get in and get them to learn.
Oh, definitely. I mean, one of the running jokes in a brokerage is how many tabs do you have open, right? So it's like, anything you can do to minimize that type of experience is huge. I think a lot of people that join startups understand there's going to be that learning curve. But what's great is I think that a lot of the technology that some of the leaders in the space have had, like Coyote, for example, even Molo at this point, are starting to be adapted in adopted in different ways with different companies. So I think if anything, if you're hiring new people and you're working off of Excel spreadsheets, I think even you and I, Anthony, the same, would be a little worried about my time at that company if that's how advanced that opportunity was.
So Grace, I joked earlier that it's March and it's my birthday month, but more importantly, of course, is Women's History Month. And of course, we have great quarter gals. Can you tell me what you guys have in the work, and what was yesterday's episode like?
Yeah, Anthony, you do seem like the type of person that would celebrate your birthday for a whole month. It was a great episode. We dove into a lot of, I think, tough topics that females don't always feel comfortable talking about unless they're in a room with other females, which is, I think, the whole point of our show at the end of the day, is that we get a different voice and a different opinion about how this industry could just get better. I think I rewatched the episode, and I think we all did a really great job of not just pointing out maybe flaws or areas that can be improved, but ways that they can be improved. And I would definitely have everyone check out last night's episode with Abby. It was a really great discussion, and we have a lot of really strong women coming up this month. We are going to have a whole hour-long episode next week for International Women's Day. We're going to have our own Cassandra Gaines, who's diving into the freight tech community herself. We're going to have LaQuinta Jacobs, who is the first and only right now Chief Diversity Officer for XPO. So we'll get a more international view of how DEI programs can grow and should be run. We have Lily Shin that's going to be on. We have a whole month packed of really, really powerful women, and I'm excited to take advantage of the time and ask some good questions and hopefully have other women learn from what they have to say. So why not take advantage of it? And I'm excited that they want to be a part of this, and it says that we're doing a great job, right, Kaylee?
Absolutely. Anthony, we know that you're a statistics guy, and one of the things that we talked about yesterday was a report from Gartner released that showed that in 2021, women's participation in supply chain careers actually grew about 2%, up to 41%. And if you go back and watch the episode, it's exciting to see that growth, but when you break it down a little more granularly, the places where we didn't see a ton of growth for women was in that C-suite executive level leadership. So we talk about that a little bit. We talk about some of those disparities, and the entire episode, it was titled Know When to Grow. And so we kind of talked about how it's tough as a female to understand, this is my worth, and I know that I'm worth more, and it's time for me to make that jump into something a little bit more. So it's definitely one that you don't want to miss.
Definitely. And I think what was great is we all have different views of how our growth has really impacted, this industry. And that's the point. Not everyone's journey is going to be the same, but it's important that, each person does have a place that they want to get to.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one. In closing, Grace and Kaylee, I have some questions real quick. With this being Women's History Month, of course, we want to honor that not just for the month, but continuously throughout the year. what are some advice or some tips for allyship for guys? Because in my mind, I always said, you know, shut up and get out the way. But maybe you guys have some other tips or, you know, other ideas that you can kind of add on here.
I think my advice would actually be the exact opposite of that. Is like get in the way and ask questions. Is there's the funny thing that we talked about is like I was raised in a household with a very strong female. My whole family's that way, and the longer I'm on this earth, I realize that there's so many women that weren't raised that way and need someone to say, "Hey, what do you want to do here? What goals do you have? How can I help you?" And that alone is going to have a huge impact, a bigger impact than I think most assume that it would. So yeah, push against your first initial thoughts, Anthony.
And I'm going to give the advice that this sounds like something that should be common sense, but kind of, I feel like, watch patronizing comments, I guess, as a guy. Like, you know, it can be kind of innocuous to be like, and Abby mentioned this yesterday in our interview, to be like, oh, you do this so well for a girl, or hey, you are such a strong female in this room full of men. And it's like, it doesn't seem like it's a subtle dig, but, you know, you can say like, you're doing a great job and leave off the for a girl. Or you stand out so well and leave off the in this room full of men. So there you go. I love that question, Anthony. Thanks for being an ally.
Yeah,
we love that.
Of course, I love it too. Thanks for the advice, Grace. I'm going to take that one to heart, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'll be sure to check in with you throughout the month and week, of course. We'll see you next time. Right now, we're going to go over to Nick Osman, who has our next weather update.